Okay, so moving forward with some of the interface tools, talking about basically whenever you drop, if you click on your poly modeling shelf and you drop a cube in there, it sets it at 0 space. You have translate XYZ 0. You can also set the division numbers. We mentioned this talking about real estate between quads, in other words. Like this is perfectly even to this one right here. Well, what if I wanted to put divisions in there? You can kind of go ahead and check that by clicking over here, and you can set these things directly. This is your width, height, and depth. It's 1 unit by 1 unit by 1 unit. You could change that. Then your subdivision width, height, and depth. You can change that. To add more there. Add more there. And you can do this with tools, but sometimes it's a lot easier in preparation if you know what you're actually going to start modeling to go ahead and set your division heights there too. One thing I will mention, if you look at your number keys on the keyboard, you have various sets, especially the 1 through 6 is pretty important. 1 basically is this preview, how it is. 2 is a smooth preview, basically if you were to put a smooth modifier on it plus the wireframe of the original. 3 is just your smooth preview. 4 is your wireframe view. 5 is back to your shaded view, and 6 is actually your texture. If you have textures on it, it's kind of what you can imagine for the texture view, basically. But we'll go back to, you don't really want to work in this smooth preview. Try to avoid as much as you can, because simply if I were to go in here and start adjusting things, and I'll go over this here in just a minute, if I start looking at it, start moving stuff up and like that, then I go back out to my smooth preview or my unsmooth. This is actually what I did to the actual mesh model. So it's really important that you just kind of work in a low poly modeling shape the entire time. So if you notice, I went and I changed modes. If you right click, if you have the object selected and you right click, you get these panels of different things you can do here, and these are the most important up here: your edge mode, object mode, face mode, and your vertex mode. Right now I'm in object mode. That's usually represented by the green selection. If you right click, you can go to edge mode. That means you're basically affecting only edges of the divisions. Like this. So if you were to go on that and you were to go to your transform, you'd be moving the edge of that tool. Now if you switch it over to vertex, you're going to those vertex points. You're affecting those vertex points. And notice I'm moving them on the XYZ axis. You can move them in the middle, but like I said, you wouldn't suggest that. You can't see the value of where you're moving it in your channel box editor because you're not manipulating the entire object as a whole. Your face mode, now you're affecting these faces. So you can see if you were on smooth preview, if you hit 3, and you start affecting these shapes like this in this different mode, you're offsetting the way the low poly res model looks. Drastically if you were to go back out to the original view. The reason why that's important is because if you were to go to render is not going to pick up the smooth shading preview. In other words, just to demonstrate that, here's my render, which it's on Arnold render, and I'll switch it to the Maya render. This is what I render out because the Maya doesn't read it as it has been added actual smooth modifier on it, which is based up here. It's just a smooth preview. Basically, this is what you will get if you add this modifier to it, but it's best to stay away from it until you really need to add it on there, and I'll show you how you could go about adding it on there. In other words, if I'm going to create a circle, a sphere, you could do it like this, but then you get all these units with these triangles, which are kind of hard to deal with sometimes. You could actually go and create a cube, put the smooth modifier up here on it. If you open up the box, you can see division level 1, sharp edges, smooth it over. It's created these different, it's smoothed over the mesh itself, and you can create different divisions. Say if you pump that up to 2, now you've got basically almost a sphere that you can better manipulate, and it's all quadded out. And then we'll talk about making sure you can't undo something. Maya's going to record this in its history, everything you've done to this thing, and say if I want to keep it like this and I want to continue using this sphere like this, I should go up to the delete by type history, and that deletes any kind of, it turns it back to its original state, in other words. So if you were to mash smooth preview on that, now you've got a nice smooth sphere with basically nice faces that you can manipulate, stuff like that. So, any more cues on this? I think we talked about if you have multiple objects in there, if you want to select both of them, you shift select the next one, and that's going to turn your original white. So say if you drop another one in there, it kind of works as a chain. I got P cube 1, 2, 3. Say this is my original one. Shift select that one, shift select that one. Now everything trailing behind is white, and your original one, the last part of the trail, is the green selection color. Or you could just do this right here. Your layers tab is important too to pay attention to, especially whenever you're doing your image planes for your reference assets. Basically layers, it kind of works kind of like maybe a Photoshop layer where you can hide layers, you can composite things. Say I want to make a layer out of this right here. Create layer from selected. You can name it. This is my original for my object layer. Thinking about names too long. There we go. And you can lock these objects down, hide them. It's there, it's just hidden. If you want to turn it into a wireframe template or just a reference, now you can't click on or anything. And then you can delete from layers or delete actual layers in general. So let me talk about some of this tool shelf over here. Now these up here are things you can do to your objects in general, and we'll talk about surfaces and the difference between surfaces and mesh in a minute whenever we work with the surfaces. But just to kind of like show how you can take this further. Say you have a cube here and you want 4 divisions. How do you get like, say like a rim around this? How do you get that middle division to kind of pull out? In other words, you can go to, say, your face mode, and you can start selecting these faces. And all of them act together. Start pulling them like that. And then we get into the whole aspect of extruding and using your tools to do these things. Now, extruding is basically creating divisions and more meshes from a face or an edge. I recently started using this shelf tool up here, your tool shelf. If you click that, like all your major tools come up: extrude, bevel, bridge, and the more we experiment, the more you'll get to messing with these things, or you'll have questions. How would you connect an edge to an edge, and create a polygon face in that. Well, you got your bridge tool. Say I want to extrude one of these faces out here. You hit extrude. Now this box right here comes up. This is a good way of kind of like keeping track of what's going on. And if you notice, my marquee or my selector tool changed here. It works the same way. I want to pull this face out basically. Now I can kind of pull the face out. You can kind of make it go up, make it go any way like that. You can actually use it to do it like this. If you hold over there in the middle mouse key, you can kind of like, you can see the actual value of the thickness. If you want to put divisions in here, you can add divisions like that. I usually don't like doing that, so I'll keep it off for now. The faces together, we'll talk about that in a little while. You can actually, while it's still selected, you can hit this middle, and what that does, it works for the scale. So if you want to scale it out, you want to do all these faces together, and you can go up here to your mesh tools, edit mesh, extrude. The same box comes up. Divisions 1, 2, 3. Do you want to taper it off? Do you want it to twist a little bit? What happens if you twist it some? I've never really. I don't know. Works the same way. Keep faces on or off. Now you've got something that's going to look really weird whenever you that 0.5 0.8. Multiple, if you want to select multiple faces, if you select that and then you hit shift, you've ring selected it. Then if you hit that one, ring selected that. If you just keep selecting, it's obviously going to select the whole thing. That's all I'll talk about with this one. I don't want to overload with tool sets, but we'll kind of keep exploring tools as we go along. I kind of want to get into NURBS and curves before we go too further with that. Kind of go ahead and get that out of the way, and so you have an understanding of basically, the makeup of the actual object and creating curves from just like lines. Easy method of creating things. So, but okay, well, that's it for this one.